My directorate calls it the calibration directive, and I have run it 9 times on 8 worlds. It is the gentlest thing we do before we ever let a hull break atmosphere. No weapons, no landing party, no demand. One envoy, one sight, one escalating sequence of light and tone, carried out alone in the dark so that whatever happens, happens to a single mind and not a population. We are looking for the fracture point. Every species has one. You raise the intensity until the subject's nervous system gives terror, collapse, violence, prayer. It does not matter which. And the fracture point tells you what kind of neighbor you are about to have. I was sent to the 3rd planet of an unremarkable yellow star to find that point in the species called human. I found something else, and I have spent the 4 years since trying to decide how to file it. I chose a dry lake bed in the western interior because the directive specifies open, low-noise terrain, and because I had identified a single human moving alone across it on the night I needed. A mechanic named Daniel Prout, returning home late from a tow job, on a road that crossed the flat for 11 empty kilometers. No witnesses, no children, no proximity to settlement. The protocol does not require consent because the protocol is designed to never be noticed as anything but weather. I hovered at the edge of detection and began at the lowest rung. Rung 1 is light only, a slow color cycle along the horizon, dim enough to be aurora, bright enough to register. 11 of 14 species I have tested on other assignments do not even break stride at rung 1. Prout stopped his vehicle in the middle of the empty road and got out to look. That alone was unusual. Most subjects who notice rung 1 assume it is natural and keep moving. He did not keep moving. He leaned against the hood and watched, the way you would watch something you expected to eventually understand. I raised it to rung 2 light with a tonal layer beneath it, a pulse calibrated to sit just under the threshold of comfortable hearing. This is where the protocol expects the first true reaction. Most minds interpret an unexplained pulse felt rather than heard as a threat to the body itself, and they retreat, or they shout, or they run. Prout tilted his head. Then he hummed back. Not loudly, not in any panic. He matched 4 notes of the pulse with his own voice, missed the 5th, laughed quietly at himself, and tried again. I want to be precise about what that did to my reading. The instrument does not have a category for amusement at rung 2. I had to manually log it as an anomaly and continue. Rung 3 adds duration to intensity. The same elements held longer than any natural phenomenon could plausibly hold, which is meant to trigger a different kind of fear entirely. Not alarm at a strange thing, but the slower dread of recognizing that the strange thing has no intention of stopping. This is the rung where most minds begin negotiating with themselves, telling themselves a story that makes the impossible duration bearable, usually by deciding it must be something explainable after all, a storm, a satellite, a trick of tired eyes. Prout did not do that either. He took his phone out, looked at the time, said 40 minutes then, as though setting himself a private deadline for nothing in particular, and put it away again. He was not negotiating with the experience. He had simply decided to keep it company for a while. By rung 4 the directive calls for compound stress, light, tone, and a 3rd element, a directional pressure wave, harmless but disorienting, that most nervous systems read as the ground tilting beneath them. This is usually where the test ends. I have watched scientists vomit at rung 4. I have watched soldiers draw weapons on the empty air. Prout staggered once, caught himself on the truck door, swore under his breath in a tone of mild irritation, and then instead of running he planted his feet wider, the way a man braces on a rolling deck, and kept his eyes on the lights. He said aloud to no one he could see, "Okay, that's new." Then he kept watching. I raised it to rung 6. There is no rung 7 in the standard directive. 6 is the design ceiling, the maximum stimulus our instruments can sustain without risking permanent injury to the subject, calibrated against the most resilient species in our prior survey. At rung 6 I have, on 2 other worlds, watched the test end in the subject's death from cardiac failure, which the directive treats as a valid data point. Prout sat down on the hood of his truck. He took a thermos out of the cab, poured what I later confirmed was lukewarm coffee, and drank it while the entire sky in front of him pulsed and sang and pressed at the air around his body like a held breath. He watched the pattern for what my recording shows was 11 minutes without a single defensive posture. Then he set the thermos down, stood up, and began clapping a rhythm against his own leg, not matching my sequence, but answering it, the way you answer a question with a different question. I had never seen that done. I had no rung for it. I did the only thing the directive permits when a subject does the unexpected. I held rung 6 steady and waited, because waiting is itself a measurement. He kept time with me for almost 4 minutes. Twice he changed his own rhythm midstream, listened to see if I would change with him, and when I held steady, he adjusted to mine instead, testing. I understood later whether I was a pattern or a person. On the third attempt, I shifted the tone by 1 interval, a small thing, almost an accident on my part. He caught it instantly and shifted his clap to mirror it within 2 beats. I do not have a word in my own language for what I felt watching that. The closest translation is something between vertigo and grief, the specific dread of discovering that the ceiling of your instrument is not the ceiling of your subject. I ended the test at rung 6 because there was nowhere higher to put him. Not because he broke, because I ran out of directive before he ran out of calm. He climbed back into his truck a few minutes after I withdrew the lights, finished his coffee, and drove the rest of the 11 kilometers home at, according to the vehicle's own telemetry, an unchanged and unhurried speed. He told no one. There is no record of him ever speaking of that night to another human being. He did not need to be believed. He had simply had an experience, found it interesting, and gone home. My report to the directorate says what the instruments say. Subject sustained rung 6 stimulus for a duration exceeding our maximum prior observation, exhibited no measurable fracture response, and independently initiated reciprocal communication using a self-generated pattern outside the test parameters. The fracture point of the species called human was not found, because the species called human did not arrive at this encounter looking for a fracture point. He arrived at it looking for a song. I have been asked in the years since, by envoys preparing for their own first sendings, what I would tell them about humans. I tell them this: do not mistake the absence of panic for the absence of danger. We built our instruments to find where a mind breaks because a mind that breaks tells you everything about what it cannot do. We have no instrument for a mind that does not break, because we never built one expecting to need it. I have gone back through the directive's design notes since that night, the ones written generations before I was assigned anywhere. They assume, reasonably, that overwhelm is always an attack on the subject, that the only sane response to being flooded with more than you can process is to fight it, flee it, or be undone by it. Nothing in the design anticipated a subject who would simply sit down with it. Prout did not survive rung 6. He was never in danger of failing to survive it. He spent it the way you might spend a long wait at a closed gate, mildly inconvenienced, mildly curious, looking for something to do with his hands until the gate opened or didn't. Somewhere on that lake bed, sitting on the hood of an ordinary truck, a tired man finished his coffee, answered a stranger's question with a better one, and drove home without once raising his voice. I do not know what such a species does when the lights it is answering are not asking a question. I have not yet found anyone willing to test it, and 4 years on, I am no longer certain I want to be the one who does.